It's the Gameside Podcast.
So, welcome back. We're settling in again after a hectic week. I have here with me Adam Lieb, CEO of Gameside. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. I've been just
Loving
working.
Wednesday.
Yeah, just another Wednesday. I'll make sure to catch Adam Lieb speaking at NFT NYC April 12th to 14th. Yeah. Actually, do you know what day you're speaking? Usually?
April 13th.
Okay, April 13th. Yeah, make sure to catch him talking. Yeah, are you excited?
I am. I love going to New York. I love the city of New York, and I love that my job allows me to have an excuse to go to those places and see people that I love in those cities. So I love that I can do that regardless of, who's also coming into town for events, which is also cool to see people that will be attracted to those events. But I went last year. This year, of course, I'm doing a talk and excited about that and excited for hopefully some feedback and discussions. I think it's it's an interesting talk from my perspective because I'm supposed to be standing up there talking about as an expert about how you can grow a Web3 game. And the answer is I don't know. No one knows. And I think that's, I have some input of some of the things you basically shouldn't do and some of the things that could work, but we're so far at such a new space. There is no keys to the kingdom and some template that I can give everyone that will make them a lot of money. And I don't know if that's what people want or expect, but that's obviously not what they're going to get because it doesn't exist. So it'll be an interesting one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very interesting discussion there. And maybe we don't have the keys yet, but we definitely have a lot of good examples to go over. So GDC week just finished. How was it for you? I know a lot of people in our team went.
Yeah. We think we had eight people there, which was a lot. I'm not really sure who approved that expense report. I don't think it was me, but yeah, we had a ton of people there. I love GDC. I mean, there's definitely all sorts of negative things that people have to say about it, but I think it's a great event. I think it's probably the only event that I can think of that really kind of brings people from almost every part of the industry together, both types of games, mobile and PC console, and obviously now crypto. A lot of those people there. You get developers, you get marketers, you get producers. You sort of get everyone, and I think that's just really cool that they can all come together in the same place, and that I can go back and forth between different types of meetings with vastly different types of people, and you just don't get that at almost any other trade show. Every other type of show has enough of a focus that you kind of get the same people, which can be fun too. But I think that the size, I don't know, GC 24,000 people or something. I think I saw. Don't quote me on that, but it's a big number of tons of people. Love that, and I love San Francisco. It certainly has its problems and things that people don't like, but I like to go there and travel around a little bit. So yeah, I enjoyed it. I had a good trip and I was tired when I was done, but good trip overall.
A good way. Tired in a good way.
Well, tired in a tired way.
For sure. I know that E3 this year, what's it called? There's a lot of companies that aren't going to be doing their big pitches at E3 this year. So GDC is sort of the big one now, right? Or was it always the big one? I'm kind of new to this, so.
They're really different. It's funny because both of them are old shows, been around for a long time, and I think where they started and where they are is really different. E3 was really built to be the show where companies announce games to try to get Best Buy and GameStop to physically buy them and stock them in their stores. So it was built to kind of sell those companies, where GDC is meant to be more of an internal industry event about knowledge sharing and education. GDC is full of, I don't know the number, but hundreds at least, I think, low hundreds of different talks and sessions about every aspect of game development and games marketing and all of that. So it's a really people, you should leave GDC being smarter, I think, if you're doing it well. And E3 is not about that. E3 is about selling games. It's become a little bit different thing now that Best Buy and GameStop maybe aren't the most relevant to the industry. It's become more of a place you go to announce a new game or announce really anything. But yeah, I don't know what's going on with E3 this year. It's definitely none of the big three, Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo will be there. A lot of the major studios have already sort of announced that they're not going to be there. So I don't know what it'll be like this year, or
That's
if it'll
pretty
happen
good.
at all. I'm not sure.
Yeah. So GDC is like the big one, would you say?
It depends what for,
At least
right?
in the
Like, I mean, if you
US.
want to, I mean, people don't announce games at GDC. So if you went to GDC to like, learn about the next big game that's launching next year, like you probably didn't have that happen. So I think they're pretty different. I don't know that I'd even necessarily like kind of compare them, other than they're both, both
Sure.
games industry relevant.
Yeah, I did end up seeing a lot of discourse around how GDC isn't very affordable, but it is almost sort of like a required event if you want to be serious in the industry, right? And if you want to network and stuff like that.
Yeah. I think that they're, I don't know about required. I think for some people probably feels required. I mean, in a lot of ways, I wish it weren't in San Francisco because of that. San Francisco is an extremely expensive city to get to, extremely expensive city to stay in. I mean, the sort of like tourist tax and things are super high. Like basically, everything's like twice as expensive as it. You think a hotel room is $300, and then you're like, oh, but the San Francisco city tax and California tax, and all of a sudden it's a $600 hotel room. So yeah, I definitely think that it is not the most accessible show, and I'm sure it would be. There are a lot of things that would make it better if it were more accessible. I think you'd get more people from different backgrounds and different locations. Obviously, I live in Seattle. It's an hour and a half flight for me, so that's not all that hard to do. It's hard for a lot of other people to do. Um, yeah, as much as that my opinion matters, I think it would be great to be somewhere else. I don't know if that'll happen or if it's even possible. For all I know, they signed a 20-year deal with Moscone to have it in San Francisco, so that's conceivable. But yeah, I wish it were more accessible.
Hmm. Yeah, I know that a lot of people who went on our team, like they didn't even go into the venue, into the event itself, right? But you were able to like talk with people outside and have meetings and network outside of the venue anyway. So
Well, it's not a bunch of venues. It's kind of a complicated setup because Moscone is just like a multi-building convention center, and there's a bunch of the buildings and a bunch of the rooms are talks and lectures and things. And we didn't do one this year. I think we did one last year. I think Emily gave a talk about how to activate influencers for your game or something like that. And so that was part of it. And then there's also like an exposition um, show floor thing, which I'm sure some people on the team went to, and that's more where you get companies that are kind of like selling things to game developers, like I don't
yeah,
know,
they have their booths up and
Unity
stuff.
or Unreal, like companies that sell software to games companies. They they'll have booths and kind of a traditional trade show, but that's sort of like one aspect of it.
So, is there anything super crazy that happened at GDC? What's the tea
I don't know.
educational
I'm sure
moment?
there's lots of stuff that I'm not in the loops that know about the tea. So I don't know. I'm boring. I don't know. I take like, you know, business meetings at, from 8 a.m. to 10
That
p.m.
is
and then
the
I go,
tea, right?
and then I
Yeah.
go home and go to bed. Other than one, I don't know. I think I was out to like two one night. So I think I had one late night, but it was not,
Crazy.
yeah, crazy. I went with a buddy. We went to Chinatown and found the only place, like legit, the only place in Chinatown that was open like post 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock or something, and we were there, and the place was bumping as you could expect. So we hung out there, and that was my wild and crazy night. So yeah, no. Again, sure, there's tea. I don't know. I don't. No one tells me about that stuff.
What about the tea we're here to hear about, like mobile gaming, user generated
I
content?
mean, like in a lot of ways, I think GDC and like almost any of these things is like ends up being like a IRL like LinkedIn, where it's like what
Mm-hmm.
the stuff people are posting on LinkedIn, people are talking about there. So it's like
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I could have told you before the conference probably the like 10 conversations that you consistently hear or have. Like,
Right.
what about generative AI? Is it going to replace your
Yeah,
job? Is it going to
AI.
replace my job? Is it going to replace game development as a whole? Like, that was a conversation you was going to have. Like,
Yeah.
is Web3 dead? Is it going to have a
Yeah.
rebirth? Is it like not Web? It should be called Web 4. Like, I mean, there's like
Web 4. Can
well,
we
I
skip?
mean, I don't know about that specific conversation happening a bunch, but I think the general, you could say like the net of what you see on LinkedIn is I think where a lot of those like this conversation just happening in real life rather than on commented threads. It's always a little bit, I would say, ahead of what's actually happening. Like a lot of people, I think you talk about a lot of stuff that's not happening yet, that's not out yet, that people are starting to work on or are working on. So you get some of that kind of stuff that isn't LinkedIn ready because it's still behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but I don't know. I'm sort of not. Again, every year it is some version of what what's going on LinkedIn. That would be my assessment. I don't know. People could tell me I'm wrong, but I think that's pretty much what I see and hear. So Yane, you could tell me, what are people talking about on LinkedIn, and I'll probably tell you those are things that people are talking about at GDC.
For sure.
Personally, the thing I love about GDC is, like I said, people come from everywhere, and it's a
And
good
all sorts of
chance,
cool
like,
stuff.
which is a good chance to see people in real life that, sometimes, I mean, I met one of our coworkers who's worked at GameSite for over a year. I've never met him IRL. So like, that was great. Met a bunch of customers who, we've gone from introduction to maybe we've worked with them for a year, and I've never meeting them IRL. So being able to do that is super awesome, because you get people who, as expensive as it is, like, do fly over from all over the world or from wherever they are to come to GDC. So, for me, it's more about trying to have those, like, real conversations with real people in real life, and GDC is a great opportunity to do that. I think that the net average of my conversations was probably more pessimistic than what you'd see on LinkedIn. I think you get a lot more
Okay.
yeah, we tried it on this project and it sucked, or it didn't work, or like, yeah, maybe in 10 years, but not today. And I think on LinkedIn, you get more like, next year there'll be $1 billion game franchise solely built by robots. And it's like, people post stuff on LinkedIn for comments, but that was probably not what people were talking about at GDC overall.
For sure. I mean, I would say that's almost like refreshing compared to LinkedIn, right? It's not just about like optics, but people are trying to have like genuine conversations with each other as people in the industry, right? Sounds kind of nice.
Yeah, I'm sure there's some of that, and you overhear it. Like, so many conversations, you're in a hotel lobby and you can hear people 2 seats over from you that, like, Chat GPT this and, Da Vinci that or whatever. So you do hear a little bit of that, and like kind of get that vibe. I mean, last year it was like mostly crypto stuff where,
Right.
there was a lot of conversation about that, a lot less this year for sure. So yeah, I mean, there's always the kind of what's hot, and I think that's also like, most GDC conversations start with like, oh, I'm so tired, I had to walk here from so and so place, or like, I'm on meeting number 7 today and I'm so tired.
The
Chat
grind.
GPT is probably another one of those kind of icebreaker things. I mean, then maybe the next trendiest type thing I probably heard the most discussion about was just like free to play games. There's like major free to play games that have been shut down in the last 6 months. Big games, big budgets, and like more questions around like sustainability of free to play, from thinking like, sort of PC console, like HD games, and what other business models people should be pursuing. There's definitely lots of conversation about the various, like, Game Pass type things. Just, I don't know how much that folks should be thinking about that as a viable path to game distribution. I heard a lot about like, oh, we were building a game and we were building it to be free to play, but now we're really thinking that like we need to probably do a premium SKU or something like that, because we're concerned about the like massive risk of launching a big budget free to play game, which is no doubt the case. I think some of the shutdowns recently have scared people.
Interesting. So, I mean, I think that's also sort of reflective of like the overall like health of the gaming industry, I guess. Are people feeling like the game industry is doing well, like it's growing, or is it a lot of people like sort of adapting to like slowing growth and stuff like that?
I mean, I don't know. Everyone's in the industry, so no one has like a unbiased opinion of it. Everyone, I would hope, that is working at a company that's building the game is like bullish on that thing existing and working and being successful. So I don't know that that's the right cohort for anything like that. I mean, I don't know if the games industry is like generally healthy, but yeah, there are some things are doing better than others, and so yeah, there's naturally going to be a tendency to like push towards the things that are doing better. Like, for sure, a trend would be like, we definitely see so many mobile game companies that are launching titles on PC or console, either ports or net new games or cross-platform cross-play. That is not a new trend, but it's definitely happening more in full force. I think I had multiple major mobile publishers I talked to at GDC who are not really thinking about launching games that don't have a cross-platform component anymore. They think that it's just, games should be playable and accessible on non-mobile devices. I don't know, 3 years ago, I wouldn't say that was a thing many people talked about, and that's happening now. So,
Interesting.
Yeah, I think that IDFA deprecation on mobile is definitely scary for some folks. So, looking at expansion in tertiary markets or secondary markets maybe makes a lot of sense for folks.
I'm sure it's a very tired topic for you now. Do you
I
think
mean,
AI will take our jobs?
from what I've used and what I've seen, that AI today, plus I don't know some amount of time in the future, is pretty good at doing things that, like, I would say relatively inexperienced and junior people can do, and a lot of different things, both like code and SQL query writing, as well as like marketing copy or sales lead generation. Like, yeah, it can do a pretty serviceable job of a lot of those things. Like, I think you've used it yourself, right? Like,
Yeah,
write me a tweet about so and so game and like make it controversial so people will like click it or like it or retweet it.
that's crazy.
Give me 10 tweets. You give me 10 of those tweets. Like, I don't know, it can do a pretty decent job, and a few of those 10 tweets will probably be roughly the same quality as like a junior social media marketing person.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're really far away from being at the as good as like an expert master social media marketing person who's going to craft the perfect tweet. It's
Mm-hmm.
not going to do that. It's going to do the junior version of that. And so, yeah, in as much as there are roles and jobs that pieces of those can be replaced by like a fairly junior, inexperienced person, like I think that some of those things will happen sooner than later.
Mm-hmm.
But the like, I don't know, hard stuff, I think it's just further away from. I don't know, the game stuff. Like games, people seem way more out on it for a variety of reasons. I think there are massive legal issues that no one's really quite figured out yet. If I say, hey, give me a tree to put in my game, and the data set of tree images they're using includes trees from Fortnite, let's imagine. Now, and I use that in my game. Well, now I've stolen a tree from Fortnite and put it in my game. I don't know, I did it. I didn't do it on purpose, but the AI told me that was the tree that was a good looking for my game. Well, that's a huge problem. I don't think you want to be stealing trees from Fortnite or whoever.
Any other
So
property, yeah.
that is a massive problem that hasn't been particularly solved yet. There's
True
all
AI
sorts
art.
of issues with like synthetic voice and like actors guilds and things like that. Wouldn't profess to be an expert on any of that. I think for our use cases at GameSite, we have a couple things that are in development that we'll use ChatGPT for like potentially like a thing you can use in the product to ask for cool stuff. We're messing around with it, but I don't know. The existential, will AI take all of our jobs? I don't know. Maybe
Yeah, not today. So
not today.
yeah, that's cool to hear. I did get to hear a little bit from Robert about how GameSite's trying to use ChatGPT, but
Yeah. Okay. Well, that was sort of what I was referencing. I didn't know what Robert had shared or not.
mhm. Yeah, but we'll keep it on the down low until it's like official. But very, very cool stuff in the works.
It's the Gameside Podcast.
Did you get to talk to people about like influencer campaigns? Is everybody sort of like at this point on the same page about like the role of like Twitch and the role of like the streamer economy and stuff like that in marketing games?
It's funny. It's kind of like watching like your kids grow, where like I don't ever wake up one morning and like, man, you got taller today, because like that's not how getting taller works, right? You get taller like a microscopic inch by day, and I think that is kind of what's happened with like maybe the role of influencers in video games marketing, where like I feel like 5 years ago at GDC, I probably was talking with people about how it's important and how it should be a part of your marketing mix. When you're thinking about launching a game, you should have an influence strategy. And like, I don't know, some percent of companies were like, oh, of course, and great. Some percent were like, yeah, we're not really sure. Like, we think people will probably stream our game, and that's fine. We don't have a influencer team. We don't really have anyone that thinks about influencers, and like we're not really sure about it. To today, where like I don't know that there's any company, and obviously selection bias, but I don't know there's any company that we talk to who is like, yeah, influencers aren't relevant to launching our game. And like, again, like 5 years ago, that was not 0%, and now it's like 0%. So for sure, exactly how the role is different and how important that is. And it's also different by game. Like, I mean, I think if you're getting ready to launch a free-to-play action-based battle royale game, content creators is probably the number one thing you're thinking about. I don't know, if you're making a premium 20-hour narrative driven experience, like maybe it isn't the most important thing. It should still be relevant, but probably not the most important thing to think about. So Yeah, I think that the industry's matured a lot in that respect. Outside of gaming, I don't know. So more general folks, hard for me to say. But influencer marketing, creator marketing is definitely become part of every company's game plan to some extent.
Interesting. I like seeing that change. Are there like other sort of changes and shifts like that since 5 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's a million things. And a newer one would be like TikTok, probably, where TikTok now is not quite there yet. TikTok's not where influencers are, at least in the sense of like, not every game has a TikTok strategy.
Mm-hmm.
More games have TikTok strategy this year than they did last year, and a lot more do this year than they did 2 years ago. So like, it is increasing. And right now, like, we'll put government bans and like the political stuff aside. We'll just assume that like TikTok exists in 5 years. It does seem to be on the trajectory of like, hard for me to imagine any game 5 years from now doesn't have a TikTok strategy, doesn't have a person that thinks about, cares about, is knowledgeable about TikTok and how their game ought to like exist or be present on TikTok. We're somewhere in the adoption curve on TikTok that's probably like, I don't know exactly where it is.
Like
half, maybe 50% of games are like thinking about TikTok. The other 50% like aren't yet. And in 5 years it'll be 100%. But how quickly does the other 50% adopt? Those are made up numbers. I don't know if I'm right.
Just based on vibes. So for like going to GDC and networking, I was wondering if from the perspective of someone who's like never been to these events before, or like me, right? I'm new to the gaming industry. I wonder if you have any like advice or like pro tips that you'd recommend like going into this kind of space or industry.
I think it definitely depends what you're, trying to get out of it. I would say of the events that I'm aware of, I think GDC is one that's probably a little more closed to like purely open networking. Like, so much of GDC is like scheduled meeting based, and not that you can't hang out in hotel bars and bump into people and try to make friends. You could. But if you look at my calendar for GDC, obviously I'm just one person, but if you look at my calendar for GDC, it's virtually back-to-back meetings from, sunrise to sunset. That doesn't create a lot of opportunities to meet people that I didn't intend to meet. And I think so many folks like myself, you get all the GDC meeting requests and you have some of your own that you send out and you kind of book that time to see specific people. I think harder to meet people. When I was getting started in the industry, I spent a lot of my time for meeting things, trying to convince people that it's worth their time to meet with me when we went. And I would say that would probably be my advice, is like, if it's something that you want to increase your network and you want to meet people, I would do the homework in advance and spend the month before GDC trying to get a hold of people you want to meet with for whatever the like kind of relevant thing is for you, and then set those things up. I probably wouldn't recommend going to GDC without a bunch of meetings and just hope that I serendipitously met people. I'm not saying that it's impossible, and like for sure there are mixers and for sure there's networking events and like those things do all exist, and I've not been to them, so I can't like speak to their effectiveness. My advice would be, do the homework in advance, figure out who you want to meet
with your time.
Convince people that it's worth their time to meet with you, and then show up with a calendar and agenda. And yeah, you'll still meet other people while you're there. I mean, I probably met, I don't know, half a dozen or so, maybe more, new people through, I went to a meeting and the prior meeting was with someone else, like, oh, you should meet so-and-so before we started our meeting. So like, and then their stuff happens, but I would do my homework in advance.
It was nice to see people from like all over the country, like even international guests and stuff, right? So I'm wondering if there's a lot of diverse perspectives when you meet people from outside of like, just Seattle or the West Coast or even the US.
Yeah. I mean, I think that is something that is now, with like the remote world we live in, is less of a big deal than it probably was. Like, there was probably a time where it was like, wow, I don't really get to talk to people from Sweden very often. And like, I'm at GDC and I met, 2 companies from Sweden. It's like, well, now like I would just talk to those companies from Sweden any day. So there's nothing special about in person, I think. The world is so much more global, and our business is certainly more global. And, the people that you meet with are all over the world on Zoom or Meets or whatever anyway. So I don't know that was a unique aspect of GDC in the way that maybe it was before we were all so comfortable doing virtual meetings with people where we look at each other's faces on the phone.
Yeah, we have international business meetings all the time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, there was a time when I'm sure that was not like. I mean, really, it's kind of crazy thing, but like before COVID, like it wasn't that normal to be like, "Hey, nice to meet you. Let's set up a Google Hangout or Zoom or whatever, and like
Hmm.
have an introductory call." Not that that never happened, but I don't think that was not really like the normal business practice. Where now that is just like the most common thing in the world. Everyone does it all the time.
True. Hmm. That is an interesting shift. I guess that is like super normalized now. Never really realized.
It is an odd shift that you don't. The whole world went through it, so I guess it's not like a thing we talk about as much because like literally it happened to everyone.
True. You used to have to buy like the 480p like webcam, right? Good
Yeah.
times. Yeah. I'm wondering if for GDC maybe there's like things you would want to see in the future, or maybe like missed opportunities that you felt could be like improved on.
I don't know that they want or need my consulting, but I do think that there would be probably net better for the industry to not be in San Francisco and to be in a place that is more financially accessible. I'm not an event planner, so what do I know? But I go to lots of conferences in Las Vegas, and like my hotel rooms in Las Vegas for like even big shows like CES are like a fifth or fourth or something of what I pay for my GDC hotel rooms. So yeah, that makes it a lot more accessible for a lot of people. But San Francisco also has big international airports, and so I think that kind of, at least within an hour or so, like that kind of helps too. So I don't know, accessibility for sure would be great. Getting more people out there. I think the show, while as big as it is, I don't think it would hurt to be bigger. So I would like that, but I don't know. I mean, beyond that, it's most of what the show is like what people make of it, and that's. It's not something that the show kind of controls, right? That's just what people, the culture and the community have kind of come up with.
Mm-hmm. How would you describe like the culture and the community of GDC?
I think it's so big. There's a million. Like I think that's part of what kind of described at the beginning. Part of what I love about the show is that it is so big that there are all sorts of micro communities. It's like it's the games industry, so it's not a monolith. The games industry isn't one thing, right? There's definitely hotels I'll go to. I'll be like, oh, this is like where it looks like a lot of the mobile people hang out. And then, oh, this is where the people who either work at Microsoft or used to work at Microsoft, like this is where they hang out. And like, here's where, all the crypto people are at this bar or whatever. Like it's not quite that clean, but there is an element of that the industry is so big and there's so many different subgroups depending on which event you go to or which party or which mixer or whatever, you kind of get those different microcosms. And like, I love that. And I think our company touches multiple groups there. So being able to kind of see those different groups in all together is really cool.
That kind of reminds me of like, it's kind of giving like Mean Girls when they're like talking about each of the different cliques at all the different tables.
Yeah, I'm sure you could do a really funny, sketch about that. I'm sure that is true. Yeah, memeing the mobile games folks and the
that's where they sit. Like,
indie game, indie Steam game folks, and there are all of those different subgroups, and I'm sure they have their own stereotypical way they dress and what bars they go to and what parties they have. I'm sure you could do something. I don't know how popular that would make you, but I'm sure you could do something like that.
It's like a pretty good overview of GDC, I would say.
It's the Gameside Podcast.